When were you diagnosed with EDS, Kelsie?
I was diagnosed at 19. The online community of Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility are very negative. When I tell you that doctors have no idea what exercises are okay for EDS, they don't. I would lay in my bed in the dark and cry because I was like, it is so painful and so difficult. How could it possibly be worth it? No one understands. I'm alone. My overcoming pain and getting stronger and raising my quality of life is the Whealth program. It really wasn't that hard. Starting the program and going through, they did such a phenomenal job at slowly ramping up the difficulty that, you blink and all of a sudden, wow, I'm lifting weights. It was so deeply ingrained in me that, this is a suffering sentence and I could never pass this on. And also I don't want to resign anyone else to a life of caring for me because I'll probably be totally disabled by 30. I would say that Whealth was a big part of reversing that mentality for me.
Why don't we jump into your story? I recall looking at a picture or several pictures of you in the hospital. Potentially you broke your back in 3 places. What happened with that, Kelsie?
Yeah, so, oh my gosh, that was so long ago. So that actually, the way that we found that, I, like any other person with hypermobility, spent most of my life just with random pain and, we're always like, oh, it's tendonitis. I wore a lot of, braces on my joints growing up, didn't really know, kind of just felt like a lemon. And then one day I got really sick. It was my senior year of high school with just something respiratory, and it lasted for 3 months. And I can't remember if this was the time that I coughed up blood or not. I don't know. I can't remember, but they were very concerned about it. So they sent me for x-rays to see if I had pleurisy or pleural effusions or pneumonia in my lungs. Those x-rays came back and they were like, your lungs are clear, but there's wedging in your thoracic spine. And I was like, okay, what does that mean? They said it means your spine is either broken right now or it was broken sometime in the past. And I was completely shocked because I was not involved in any kind of contact sports or anything like that in school or, out of school that would have resulted in a fracture like that. So very shocked. And they said, don't bend at all until we can determine if the fractures are active or if they are healed. And they couldn't schedule the MRI for 2 weeks. And so they sent me home and I was thinking, how do I not bend for I have to drive myself to school. I have to bathe. What do you mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Don't do anything with your spine. So, how did you navigate that?
Honestly, we tracked down some back braces and I essentially just fixed my posture overnight. It's actually gotten a lot worse over the years. It's not as good as it used to be. But it was very painful. And for those 2 weeks, I just bent as little as possible. And then 2 weeks later, the MRI rolled around and they said the fractures are healed. So at some point, T7, 8, and 9, I believe, broke from compression fractures. So
wow.
They don't know when it happened, but I was also diagnosed with Scheuermann's disease. So I have some of that degeneration in my thoracic spine, some Schmorl's nodes and things like that definitely contributed to the formation of the compression fractures.
Yeah, and I remember when you were sharing your story a year or two ago, just one of the things that really stood out to me was how you said that before you started the Whealth Hypermobility Program that you just or always kind of had this impression or idea that living with hypermobility EDS was a death sentence or a suffering sentence. What did you mean by that? What has your life looked like with hypermobility?
So I'm glad you asked that because I would like to address the way that, and I'm not coming for anybody because I had the same mindset, but I have noticed that the online community of Ehlers-Danlos and hypermobility, a lot of spaces online, not the Whealth program, a lot of spaces online are very negative and they're very focused around, if you've been diagnosed with this, that's it. You're disabled, go on disability, quit your job, be relegated to a wheelchair. And I'm not saying that there are definitely cases of Ehlers-Danlos or other hypermobility, syndromes that people have very severe symptoms, and they, those are very real issues. But I think that a lot of the online communities are a very negative echo chamber that take away our motivation to try and get stronger. And I don't want to say get better, because it's not something that goes away, but get stronger and more capable. So for a long time, I had that same mentality of, I am permanently disabled and I can't do things that other people can do, and my body is fragile, and I, can't exercise. I was told that lots of exercises were off limits because they would be bad for my body. There were some times that I did physical therapy actually with a professional, and they were the wrong exercises, and they landed me in the hospital with, inflammation through my spine that resulted in multiple pinched nerves. So
Right.
there was this kind of fear around doing anything physical, and just this constant weight of like, every action that I take or adventure that I go on has a cost, and I'm going to pay it no matter what. And there's nothing I can do to mitigate that. So I just have to suffer through it.
Did you feel like your symptoms or your life got worse after getting the diagnosis of EDS? I mean, just having that association and then going to support groups and then feeling like, oh, I'm more disabled than I already am. Yeah.
That's a really interesting question. I would say probably the most impactful part of being diagnosed was I finally had answers to all these questions of what is wrong with me and why. For a long time, I was like, it's in my head, it's in my head, it's in my head. Like, I'm just weak. And I would push myself past boundaries that I shouldn't have pushed myself past, because I wanted to prove that I was like worth as much as anybody else, and that I could do as much as anybody else. And a lot of times I would actually push myself. And I'm sure anybody with any kind of disability is listening to this going, yeah, that is me too. Because we want to earn our rest, kind of. Like, to me, it was always like, if I can work hard enough and push hard enough, then when it goes bad and I have to pay that cost, then people will be okay with it, because I have proven how productive and useful I am. So I would say for a time after the diagnosis, it actually was a huge relief and a huge blessing, because I finally understood so much more about, what was going on with my body, the things that I did actually need to avoid. And I was able to start making changes, lifestyle changes, to sleep and to, certain things to avoid, and, inflammatory foods, sugar, stuff like that made things worse. And I knew to start protecting my joints. That was something that I did not know, prior. I was constantly hyperextending, and, I was diagnosed relatively early. I mean, back then, like, now it's a lot more common to get diagnosed, younger.
How old
but
are you?
I'm 27.
27. Okay. Yeah, I'm 28. So, and when were you diagnosed with EDS, Kelsie?
I was diagnosed at 19.
19. Okay.
So this was, 8 years ago. EDS was still a very unheard of condition back then. Now I think it's kind of hit social media, which is so perplexing to me.
Right.
But it's gained traction. People know what it is more, which is great. But I will say, though, in answer to your previous question, there was a time I think that the mentality shift maybe contributed to a period of depression, because I was like, grieving the life I thought I couldn't have.
Interesting. Finally getting the answers for why you were feeling pain and all of these symptoms with EDS. It made sense. So I imagine, was there an element of comfort in that? But then also there was a death of like, I'm a normal person. I now have EDS. I'm not like my peers. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, exactly. So it was validating in the sense that, hey, it's not in my head. I have an MRI that shows holes in my spine. Like, it's not in my head. I'm not making it up. These things are real. I can do all of the joint hypermobility things. Like, I was formally diagnosed by multiple doctors. Like we know, actually, my father has hypermobile EDS, so I got it from him. Thanks, Dad.
Okay.
Um, but there is definitely an element of grieving and loss associated with it. And I think people don't really necessarily pick up on that always. And I've actually been privy to several I don't know how this happens, but there have been a multitude of people in my life that I've either known for a long time or have shown up briefly. And I'm like, hey, I think you might want to get evaluated for hypermobility. And then they end up getting diagnosed. And so I've witnessed that moment of, oh my gosh, like I'm different, and all the things that you just said. And the thing that I always tell people that helped me and took me however many years to realize was your body is the same and you are the same person as you were before the diagnosis. So nothing has actually changed. You have always had this condition. You just didn't know it. And now you have a label and you have answers and you have understanding. So I know it feels like something has changed and you've just been handed this new ailment, but really you've been coping with it your entire life without even knowing. So if anything, it's all upward from here.
That's a cool perspective because I think there's so much weight that can be associated with any sort of diagnosis. I don't have EDS. I don't have hypermobility. Katie and Andrew do, of course. I felt such an intense weight when I got my MRI report back, and they were like, you have an L5S1 disc herniation and your back is, messed up, whatever. All the associations that come with potential MRIs or X-rays or diagnostics because of what the implication could mean. It can hit you really hard walking out of the office. And then you're like, oh my God, the doctor's office or wherever you are, like, oh my gosh, is my life going to change forever? Am I ever going to, be better? Am I ever going to be able to resolve that issue? But yeah, that's such an interesting point because I think a lot of times people go and try to get a diagnosis hoping for some sort of answers, and they can leave feeling worse. And I think that's where maybe the diagnostic process, there are shortcomings, because if we really were to help people out with EDS or hypermobility or, chronic pain, hey, if we give you this X-ray or this MRI report, like, here's what we would suggest so that you can get better. But I think a lot of times there is that disconnect and people are just so fearful. So what did that look like for you? On that point, what did your last, say, 6-7 years of life with the EDS label look like before starting our program?
Oh gosh. I had my days where it was really terrible and I had my days where it wasn't, but at the same time as I was, when I graduated high school, I started working at Chick-fil-A, and I was working 40, sometimes 50-hour weeks between that job and another couple positions at a logistics and automation company. And then also going to school full time, 15 credit hours. And it was destroying me. Like I was not thriving.
So, oh my gosh.
I was living on, caffeine and not much else. It was not a good time. I had all these symptoms that were popping up that were exacerbated by the EDS that I just didn't quite understand yet because the diagnosis was so new. Mm-hmm. And it was not a period of life that I would like to relive. I lost a ton of weight. I got really sick. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. My body was just rejecting all forms of health. And it was really difficult for quite a while. But even still, knowing what I knew about, there is a reason for this, I would say that still helped a little bit, just because I wasn't like, hey, why am I falling apart?
Right. At least you're not, that is a common story or thing that people are told with hypermobility. Like, it is reaffirming to get that diagnosis or EDS. Like, hey, I'm not crazy. These things aren't just in my head. I feel like I've been gaslit or continuing to be gaslit or not understood. So at least I have something that's like, okay, at least I'm not crazy, right? Like, what I'm feeling is true. What were or are, what were some of those symptoms that, were telltale signs of EDS before you knew what EDS was that were explained?
So many. So I was not a particularly athletic kid, but I could do the splits all the way. You know, I wasn't in like gymnastics or anything. My parents, like, you know, I was very flexible, and it was just, you know, a party trick that I pulled out every once in a while. And I had, like I was saying before, I had constant joint pain that was attributed to, you know, tendonitis, or, you know, maybe it's an old injury that didn't heal right, even though, like, how would I have gotten injured? I didn't do anything.
Right. Yeah.
Or it was, you know, growing pains. And so I would wear, you know, knee braces was a big one. I had a lot of issues with my knees, and then wrist braces. That was another one that I had a lot of issues with, and just constant back pain. Like, I thought that was kind of the consensus when we found out that my spine had broken and then healed without me noticing, was, wow, the pain must have been so constant, and I must have just totally assumed that that was so normal, that, but because I didn't know, you know, that's the thing about, you know, all of our bodies, is we don't go around asking people like, hey, are you in pain right now? Like,
Right.
does your back hurt all the time? Like, does this particular motion hurt you? Do you like avoid this movement? You don't ask people like, how do your knees feel when you walk? Like, do they feel loose? Do you feel, when you're moving around and like walking, do you feel like you're driving with a really loose steering column? You know, we're not comparing the way that our joints interact with our bodies. So it's not like we have any indication of what is normal in terms of what we're experiencing. So,
Right.
you know, that I had all kinds of things that even now, years and years post my diagnosis, some days I'm like, oh, that's not normal. There are still revelations where I go, oh, like, for instance, I remember when I worked at Chick-fil-A, and this may have been before the diagnosis actually, I was scrubbing a cabinet with a sponge, and my fingers kept dislocating.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
I didn't know what it was or why that was happening, but all I knew was I was scrubbing really hard, and then my fingers would get like stuck in a weird, you know. And then looking back, I'm like, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
I know, that's, you know, the last podcast I did with our member Josh Bowman, who has EDS as well. He was talking about how part of the hypermobility program, like the survival toolkit, you know, subsection program, is really helpful because it was giving him some tips to like orient his hands. And he said for as long as he could remember, he would have to be careful about putting his hands into his pockets because his fingers would dislocate if they kind of hit the pocket in a weird way.
Yes.
And I'm like, that is something I have personally never dealt with. But I mean, I understand that is an aspect of, depending on the severity of where you fall on the spectrum of hypermobility or EDS, that is something that is very, you know, prevalent, which, you know, it gives me a lot of empathy and also perspective on different challenges that our members deal with. So yes, very real challenges that, you know, maybe non-hypermobile members or people without EDS do not have to deal with. But how do you reconcile that aspect of like, hey, my body is different, but also at the same point in time, if I just slap this label on me and I'm going to be disabled for the rest of my life, I don't think that's very helpful or productive either, right? So how do you reconcile that?
So I'm glad that you asked that again, because, or a version of it, because I remember vividly the first time, it was a few years ago, I was starting Whealth, and I was reading through some of the material before doing the workout. And I remember in module 1, there's a part that talks about like not pitying ourselves, and forgive me if I'm paraphrasing it wrong because it's been many years since I've read it, but it was something about, you know, your body's more capable than you think, and, you know, pain isn't necessarily an indication that something is wrong, and you need to, you know, like, you have to move. You can't just resign yourself to being disabled, essentially. And I remember the first time I read it, I was kind of mad. I was like, you don't know what my body can do, and you don't know if I'm capable of these things, and like, how dare you like shame me for you know, not, you know, doing these workouts or whatever, which, you know, I think that's a really normal reaction to have. So if anybody else is having that reaction, you're thinking like, well, you don't know what I've been through, and you don't know the things that my body has suffered. You know, we don't, but there is a very shared experience, so you can trust Katie and Andrew know what they're talking about. And as I followed through I'm glad that I just kind of got over it and kept going, because they're right. They're
For
so right.
sure.
I didn't know how much my body is capable of until I tried this program. It's crazy. And it's the reason that I have um, referred it to so many of my friends and family. My cousin was just diagnosed with classical EDS, which is crazy because we're blood related, and she has a different subtype than I do. It's so odd. But showed up on the genetic panel, so, and she
Right.
had symptoms. But anyway, um, I've referred this program to several of my friends and family that have, hypermobility, and it is such a huge benefit to what you were asking about, to the ability to reconcile that, I know I'm different, I know I have boundaries, but isn't everybody different to some extent? Like, everyone has challenges, everyone has suffering, everyone has problems. Yes, most people don't know what it's like to pick up a pillow and twist wrong and throw out 3 ribs or vertebrae or whatever, but that it doesn't mean, that they don't, like, everyone is different in some way. And if I can just reconcile the idea that, yes, my body can be very fragile sometimes, it can be very frustrating, and it is okay to grieve that, but it's also okay to acknowledge that I can do a lot more than I think. And if I give my body credit for all the ways that it's adapted to living with this disorder, and, like, it's actually doing a really great job. Like, if we stop and think about how intricate our bodies are and how incredible they are, and how, most days I can walk around and I can work out and I can do so much that a lot of people can't do. So
Right.
it's really all a matter of perspective. But sometimes I do just, you know, grovel a little bit.
For sure. Well,
Like,
and I think, right. And I had that in that aspect too. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm 21 years old. I've just been diagnosed with, what the MRI said was
mhm.
some sort of congenital thing in which, this is my genetics and I had no control over it. This is what my chiropractor is telling me. It's genetic. You have back pain. You're going to continue to have back pain
Yeah.
because of genetics. And to me, I was like, that just doesn't make sense. Like, you're telling me even if there even if there is merit in this genetic thing that's shown up on the x-ray, you're
That's
telling me that is the sole cause of my back pain and that
mhm.
I have no agency in my life to improve the situation. Like, can I improve 1%, 10%, 100%? I don't know, but you're really telling me I have no agency to improve my health at all. That just doesn't make sense. And that is where I resonated with Andrew's program years ago, and I bought the program as a customer and it changed my life. So I understand too, some people with EDS might be listening and being like, you know what, Cameron, you're not the spokesperson for EDS. You don't have
Yeah.
it. You don't understand. Right. And it's like, yes, I just happen to be the one that does the podcast. Katie and Andrew have made the hypermobility group. They both have EDS. They made the program. But I think there has to be, it doesn't have to be like a death of the ego, but as you were saying, they're starting the hypermobility program. There was an aspect of the mindset that was potentially triggering for you, in which you could say, how dare you tell me that my suffering is not XYZ?
Mhm.
It comes with incredibly good intentions because we want to help people move beyond current potential comfort of like, hey, at least I'm comfortable knowing that I'm disabled and I'm different. But that long-term comfort of just accepting that, we believe, leads to far worse outcomes. So we want to help move people from that mindset to taking action and ownership. So, like, what would have happened though if you didn't move beyond that feeling of like, how dare they?
No, I honestly, I needed to hear it. Like, just
Mm-hmm.
because something hurts to hear doesn't mean it's not true. That is not an indication. Just because it makes you uncomfortable or makes you angry or whatever, it's not an indication of its veracity. It just isn't.
Yeah.
So, if I had not heard that, I mean, I can't express enough how much there are 2 things in my life that I credit the most to my overcoming pain and getting stronger and raising my quality of life. And one of them is the Whealth program. I would say, I mean, majority, like, there is so much, it makes such a huge difference. And I actually am just coming out of an injury that kept me from working out for a little while. It was a sternum repeating sternum dislocation that has finally calmed down, and I'm so happy because I can finally get back to,
Yeah.
but that period where I couldn't, because your sternum you use for everything. So there was so little that I could do. And I, in that period, you would not believe how my quality of life declined. I couldn't, the movements that I wasn't doing and the muscles that I wasn't strengthening and using, the pain came back in huge proportions. And I always knew that Whealth was making a huge difference, but that period of a few months of inactivity just really solidified for me how important that is. I just feel so much better physically and mentally when I'm moving. And I actually, I mentioned I work in the fitness space. Recently, I was looking at some, some trends and intel for the next year, doing planning and stuff. And one stat that caught my eye was exercise and like working out is just as effective, like clinically in clinical studies, just as effective as medication and therapy in alleviating the symptoms of depression.
Right.
And I was like, I knew that, but it's still crazy to see the statistic just as effective. And I'm not saying you should replace it. I'm on, I do therapy and meds myself, but it's incredible how much moving impacts us psychologically, not just physically. So that's, the Whealth program, there are so many ways that my life would be different now. I travel for work now, and I honestly don't know that I could do that without the Whealth program, because, it used to be that any kind of trip, any kind of movement, physical stressors would knock me out for days, sometimes weeks. I volunteer with an acting troupe that dresses up as Disney princesses for like kids. And we just recently did the Night to Shine with Tim Tebow, the Tim Tebow Foundation. That is one of my favorite things that I do. It is incredibly physically taxing to, run around in flats and a corset and ball gown for 5 hours, jumping up and down and, being with the kids and the guests. I could not do that. There were years that I did it before I did Whealth, and I would literally need 2 or 3 days to recover just doing nothing. And then there are days that I've done it after Whealth, and it was just like this last, I don't know if this is a great example because I actually did throw out several vertebrae, but it's very extenuating circumstances.
Sure.
But this last year I went, I drove 2.5 hours, did the event for 5 hours, slept for 4 hours, and then got up and went and got an oil change. Like it's just so different. And then the other thing, if you were curious, the other thing that has changed my quality of life is the purple mattress.
I was going to ask that because in the spirit of authenticity, right? You said two things, and I was going to ask that for sure. Yeah, I figured it was the mattress because you talk about that mattress a lot.
I am
what's the pitch on that mattress too? Yeah. We don't want to be biased here.
I am not affiliated with Purple in any way. I probably should have joined their referral program many years ago. At this point, I am responsible for upwards of a dozen sales of their mattress. My gosh. But I'm not kidding. Back in high school when I told you I was not sleeping, wasn't eating, I was like, something has to change. I'm dying. Right. Like I'm not sleeping. I'm laying awake all night, every night. And it's causing, it's causing digestive issues and it's causing other issues. And it was just this vicious cycle. And so I saw those advertisements where they show the like pane of glass falling on the eggs on top of the mattress. I don't know if you've seen that. But their claim is that it cradles pressure points so well that without putting, extra pressure, that it can catch a, 1,000-pound pane of glass on top of an egg that's sitting on the mattress without cracking the raw egg.
Wow.
And I was like, okay. It's like, if this is even remotely true, I need to know. Sure. So I went to Macy's and I laid on the mattress and I went, oh my gosh. Is this what other people feel like when they sleep? Because I could lay on my side and it didn't shove my hips and my ribs out of place. And the pain just went away. It used to be, I'd lay down and then have to wait for everything to decompress and like all the pain to but I was still in pain. But the purple mattress, I so highly recommend that for people with hypermobility, just because it does a really great job of reducing sleep dislocations. It really, really does. It makes such a big deal to me that I have a spare mattress, that a spare purple mattress that for a while I was living part-time with my sister and her husband because I was hybrid and I only went into the office sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
it was like far away. So they were very close to my office. So I would stay with them those nights that I was in office. And I bought a spare purple mattress to keep at their house because it makes such a big difference to my pain levels and my sleep quality. So that's
Hey,
my purple
hey,
mattress pick.
that's a totally fair pitch. I think the importance of figuring out that multifaceted approach. If you need a mattress, like I have a mattress that I really enjoy. I mean, you're sleeping ideally. For me, I'm in bed 8 to 9 hours a day or night, whatever you want to call it. And I have my sleep routine. I have my mouth tape. I got my eye shades. I got the 8 sleep mattress. So, I mean, sleep's very important. Dial that in, right? And I like that. Hey, if this is your suggestion coming from someone who's really improved from it, um, to the hypermobility program and the purple mattress.
Yeah.
I do want to know though, can you kind of paint a picture before and after, before the hypermobility program and after? Because we're kind of just, you know, my life is so much better. I have less pain, but like, what physically was hurting, dislocating, having issues with before? I know you mentioned wrist brace, you mentioned knee brace. Like, what did that look like before and after?
So I will say probably one of the most obvious changes is before there would be times that I would dislocate my ribs so badly that I could not breathe, could not walk, and there were times that my doctors would send me for CAT scans because they're saying we don't know if this is a AAA, an ascending aortic aneurysm, because of the pain radiating out from your spine. Like we need to know, especially because you have EDS and it's a higher a risk factor. And since I have strengthened, my core and I mean, you can't really strengthen ribs, but the muscles and everything, abdominal muscles and everything, um, that has not happened again. So there was twice that I ended up in the hospital for a CT scan because of that very thing. And just being able to not have to go through that has been amazing. So I would just say in general, there are a lot less doctor visits, even not withstanding, the emergency room. Prior to the Whealth program, I was constantly injuring something, like constantly whether it was my wrist or my knee or my, ribs or my back, there was always something that I was like, it's not healing. It's not getting better. I don't know how to fix it. And obviously not that the Whealth program is fixing joints, but I think people really underestimate how important it is to proactively strengthen those joints to keep those injuries from occurring. And now, okay, for instance, I started swing dancing after college, just as like a fun, my college had a free East Coast swing dance club. And I started going and it was really fun, but it was also brutal. Like I
Mm-hmm.
would dance for a few hours and then be laid up for like 3 days or longer. And after I started strength training with the Whealth program, I could dance for 5 or 6 hours and it was just a normal Friday.
Wow.
I mean, it like a stunning transformation. And it was I love dancing. It's so much fun. And I met my boyfriend swing dancing. So you could even go so far as to say maybe I wouldn't have met him.
Yeah, right. Wow. That is incredible.
Mhm.
That was one thing I remember too. You were just saying that, yeah, dancing would put you out for
Yeah.
days,
Hmm.
and that's just, it's tough because for you, that's dancing. For other people, it's pickleball or lifting weights or running or whatever.
Everything has a
It's
cost.
yeah, it's not a fun life to live when you just have to calculate, if I do X, then this, Y is going to happen, in the sense that that calculation is just, well, I'm going to be out for a few days, and I don't think that's a life that is fun to live. People have to live. And now like you're going through and seeing the benefit of what being strong and being in control of your body looks like. How did you get to that stage? I mean, because we're talking about the Whealth program. Like, what is the Whealth Hypermobility Program? How do you integrate it into your life? What does that look like?
So for me, well, the Whealth program is a series of workout modules and informational reading that will give you all kinds of resources on just like functional health and wellness things concerning diet and sleep and routine, and even some of the psychological things like your mentality and all those things that I was talking about before. But there are very structured weekly modules, and they'll give you instructions on how to start doing them, how many times to redo a week before they suggest, moving on, things like that. Every module comes with in-depth instructions on how to do these exercises, ways to make them slightly easier if you're struggling with them, like modifiers, ways to make them harder if maybe this is a joint that you're already kind of strong in and you need more of a challenge. Which I think that variability and level of customization was really cool, because there are days, the thing about EDS and hypermobility in general is it's such a variable illness. There are days that your joints are doing great and there are days that they are not. And if you have this program that, I can adjust the difficulty, it's a lot easier to say to myself, I'm still going to work out today. I just need to take it a little easier. So for me, what it looks like is every day at noon, I block off my lunch hour and I do my workout. And
Cool.
prior to injuring my sternum, I would say I was working out at least 3 times a week. After, this year, my resolution is I'm aiming for twice a week. And if I do more than that, awesome. And I wanted to set the bar low enough that I am still moving and aiming for it. And if I don't, hit 3, then it's not, I'm like, oh, I did 2, like I did my goal. So, but really 3 times a week, it's so doable. The modules are incredibly self-explanatory. There's all these, the videos, the visual cue videos that are just a few seconds to remind you how to do, a correct form after you've watched the full instructional video. Those are so cool because, I've been doing the module for so long now. I don't need to watch the full instructional video every time. But sometimes I'm like, okay, wait, which one is that? And it's so useful that they're just right there on the same page.
Right.
Very self-propelled, but you can get as involved in the community as you want. There's tons of people on this particular Facebook group that I do recommend as a support group. It is not negative. And it's very simple. It can be you can be as serious or as casual about it as you want. That's one of the great things. And Katie and Andrew are very responsive to questions. I see people posting videos all the time saying, hey, is my form right? How do I do this? I need a partner, whatever. And they always get answered. It's amazing.
Yeah. How were can you talk to me a little bit more about the negativity of these so-called EDS or hypermobility support groups? Support?
Yes, I can. So I am very lucky that I kind of got a bad taste in my mouth from those and kind of shied away from them after a while because they are very much echo chambers. You go on there and people, it's just post after post after post of people saying, my life is miserable. And that's pretty much it, and then other people coming in and saying, it's not your fault, which it's not, but there's no encouragement there of you can pull yourself out of this morass, or at least try, there's no, because no one wants to say you have to stop living in pity. You can pity yourself sometimes. That's totally fair. Like I said, sometimes I'm like, well, this sucks, but you can't live there. If you live there, you're not going to get stronger, and it is only going to get worse, and you are going to end up permanently disabled and in a wheelchair and unable to do the things that you love. And that's very much the attitude on those groups, is just, well, we are all in this horrible place, but at least we're in it together, and that's it. There's no.
Where do you think that collective attitude has morphed from or stemmed from? I mean, does there need to be a complete revamp of voices around EDS and leaders and stuff like that? I mean, where is this voice and message coming from?
Yeah, I can only speak for myself and what I've observed, but I think that people with chronic illnesses, especially invisible illnesses, are so starved for validation and for support because, I mean, let's be honest, people don't know you're suffering, then why would they support you? They don't know you need it. So there's a reason that we feel better about using our handicap parking if it's a day where we're using a brace or a mobility aid, because it's in our minds, it's okay, people can see that I'm not normal and that I need help. So I think that there's just an underlying desire for that when these communities form, people are trying to fill that need in each other, which is an honorable thing. They're trying to say, hey, I see you, I support you, I understand your suffering. But I think it just tips over the edge, and it becomes this tornado of validation without any kind of desire to get stronger, because that's hard and it can hurt sometimes, and it can hurt to say like, hey, I think you need to make some changes, because people see that as, oh, I'm blaming you for the illness. And that's not the case at all. It's not your fault, but you do have some agency.
Right.
And that gets lost.
There's this kind of quote or idea that resonated with me. It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility.
Yeah.
I think.
Excellent way of explaining it.
Yeah. It's not your fault for the negative encounters you've had with the medical system, or, maybe you've had great experiences, but maybe you've had really bad experiences, or, you want to blame it on this chiropractor, this physical therapist, or this doctor, or my genetics. Like, hey, if you really want to take zero fault in it, of course, just being born with EDS, there's no fault in that at all. But if you kind of play that game forever, and then you don't take any responsibility, like, it's pretty assured that your outcomes are going to be going down one path. And I just don't see how that path leads to feeling better and feeling more vibrant and having less pain and feeling good about your life. And I think so many people do want to feel better. I mean, you're a case in point. You were in, like, there, I'm sure, I mean, how many more people are there in these support groups that also are recognizing it's a tornado of negativity and I want to get better? But I mean,
honestly, Cam, I think another big part of it, probably the majority, is that people are very afraid to hope. Because
they're very afraid of what?
To hope. People are very afraid to put hope in anything as an actual treatment or solution, because so many times we've faced disappointment medically and with our bodies. And there are so many times that, just as someone with a variable illness, like, you feel like the rug gets pulled out from under you all the time. Like, you have plans and then something dislocates and you can't go, or, there's just so much uncertainty in life with a condition like that. And I think people are afraid to trust something, and they're afraid to look at this and say, oh my gosh, all these people are saying this program can really help me. What if I put all this time and money and energy into it and it doesn't help me, or it makes me worse? Like, all these other things that people promised me would help me did.
Right.
And I think that fear is valid. I understand that. There were so many times in my life that things just did not do what they were supposed to, or got worse, or, like the time I went to physical therapy and it ended up, I was in the hospital from, because I had my neck was too far forward. Like, the curve was wrong. And so they gave me some, like, strengthening exercises to correct the misalignment or the miscurve or whatever. And because I was hypermobile and we didn't know it at the time, it corrected too quickly and then triggered severe inflammation down my spine. And then I was in the hospital for like, however long. And so I think it's just, people are afraid. They're afraid that, so I think if I can speak to, when I started the Whealth program, I was like, I'm scared of exercising because I'm afraid it's going to make me worse. And then I started and I saw, okay, for a solid week, all I'm doing is breathing. Like, I'm not going to hurt myself doing this. And the ramp up is so gradual, and they know what they're doing because they have the same bodies that we do. They have the expertise, they do the research. So I know I'm just an internet stranger, but try it. You can risk a little bit of hope I promise.
Yeah. And one other thing I hear is people will say like, oh, Katie and Andrew and Cam, you guys are really fit. And I think it's just like, hey, this is the current day. And it
Right.
doesn't show the
Perfect.
process of where we've been in the past. I mean, I know at Andrew's lowest, Andrew is really big right now. He's like 240 pounds, 6'5". But at, I
Six
think
foot five.
yeah, he's, yeah.
My goodness.
What I would say though is, at the kind of bottom of his journey, hopelessness, I think he was down to 185, which was small for him. Down 40, 60 pounds of muscle, and so what you're seeing right now is just kind of current day for Katie and Andrew, myself, and some of these members, even like even you, Kelsie, are members who share these stories. I'm out of pain. I no longer have sciatica. I'm doing so much better. What you
I'm
don't see is the amount of work that people put in. And I think that should be encouraging, not intimidating, because it's more so like, hey, we don't need to get that result in one day. It's going to take time. And I think if you acknowledge that it's going to take time, that should be comforting, because then you're just like, I don't need to rebuild everything in one day. I can do a few days a week at 30 minutes, a few days a week. Like, who cannot do that? I just don't see anyone on this planet that truly cannot put in 30 minutes, a few days
Yep.
a week for their health.
Well, and honestly, one of the big things is you don't, I don't want to say it's easy, but it really wasn't that hard starting the program and going through, they did such a phenomenal job at slowly ramping up the difficulty that, you blink and all of a sudden, wow, I'm lifting weights. Like I can do this. This is crazy. Um, and it can be fun if you get other people involved and say like, hey, I want you to be my accountability partner. Like I'm going to text you every day that I do my workout, my 30 minutes. And if I don't do it, I want you to bug me. And I had some friends that did that for me like the first year, and it was great. And it gave me this sense of accomplishment when I did the workout. And I promise you guys, the first workout you do, you're going to go, I just did something for myself. And it's going to feel good, even if it doesn't instantly fix your body. You're laying the foundation. And every day that you work out, you're going to feel better about yourself.
Yeah. I think there is a lot of comfort in knowing you can open up the Limitless or Hypermobility program and go, oh my gosh, that's a lot of work to do. 56 workouts in Limitless and 70 in Hypermobility. But the other way you look at it is like, wow, I have a lot of things I get to start doing. And here's what my path is going to look like to success moving forward. This is probably the most detailed and comprehensive progressive rehab and strength and mobility and stability plan to get out of pain that you're going to have ever experienced. That's
Yeah.
my bet, right? And that would be my encouragement to people listening and joining. But I mean, so Kelsie, who would you say the hypermobility program is for, Whealth program is for versus is not? Because I think there are people listening and maybe they're in those support groups and they're like, oh, that's me. I want to get better. But I'm sure there are people who are like, Kelsie has EDS, but she doesn't have this. Like I have this.
Right. I would say, honestly, I don't think it's about the conditions. I'm not a doctor, so I can't really say that with any level of reliability. But personally, I don't know that there's a constellation that comes with EDS that would preclude you from doing this. Except, I would say it actually has more to do with personality than it does the disorders. If you are someone who cannot self motivate, I wouldn't say you can do Whealth by yourself. You would need to get somebody else involved to push you.
Right.
Because if you're not going to set the time aside and do it, then yes, it will be a waste of money because you will not do the program. And
Yep.
it is self-propelled, which to me is awesome because I have, I can fit it around my schedule, but other people, it's not going to benefit. So I would still say do it. Just get someone to help you.
Yes, that's what I tell people all the time on the phone calls. I'm like, $1,000 for the program, it's not really a lot or little, depending on what the value is you get for it. $1,000 is going to be a lot for you if you have no intention on doing the program. You're going to be wasting $1,000. I do believe $1,000 for the program is frankly really reasonable.
I think it's a steal, personally.
Yeah, I mean, as do we, right? But we're the ones, trying to share that message. But people are like, of course you're going to say that's reasonable, but it's like, Yeah, but I mean, I've seen the other side of the medical system, what you can spend on stuff that doesn't give you any awareness or
Oh my
lasting
God.
results.
I just dropped hundreds of dollars on an MRI that revealed nothing.
Right. Do you have I'm always curious if you're open to share. Do you have a thought on how much money you spent on,
Oh,
medical? Yeah. Do you even want to
no,
recount
that
that?
that honestly that so my dad was a pastor growing up, so we didn't have like a ton of extra money, and I felt bad my entire childhood. Not be My parents were amazing, my doctors were amazing. They were all so supportive, and I know a lot of people don't have that experience, and I'm so sorry. My heart goes out to you. My family was great. They always believed me. They always tried to help me. But we didn't have a ton of money, and I felt so bad every time I needed some kind of procedure or test or evaluation because it's expensive. And they definitely spent thousands and thousands of dollars on me growing up just to check things, not even to, I mean, that's not even withstanding procedures and surgeries and things that, and I mean, I had a colonoscopy at 19. Who does that? So I would say the level of spending has gone down drastically since getting some things in order. Mostly because stuff doesn't get injured and then I don't have to go try and figure out what's going on with it.
That's awesome. Yeah, I remember you were kind of talking about how, when you shared your story for our Instagram, you were talking about how doctors kind of were like, hey, you could do surgery or injections or medication. It's just kind of, hey, here's the kitchen sink of how we're going to treat your pain and
Yeah.
EDS. Versus wealth is very much so, it's online. So clearly it's not going to be, we're not prescribing medications and whatnot. It's like, hey, here's how you work out and here's how you progressively get stronger. What would you say, people should really, or how, knowing what you know now after doing the hypermobility program, how do you wish EDS was treated or talked about in general?
That is a huge question. I wish that there was more. When I was diagnosed, it was you're hypermobile. See you later. Like they didn't tell me like what that meant or anything. And don't get me wrong, I was very grateful for the diagnosis, but there was no information at all. So even just the way that Wealth says, here's a bunch of stuff that you need to know. Um, that's huge. I wish that that was, neatly bundled in a packet and given to everyone upon their diagnosis. Because knowing that there are changes that you can make in your diet and in your lifestyle and in your sleep, I mean, all of that is so crucial to overall wellness, and people don't even know. They don't even know about it. It seems kind of common sense, but it's really not. There's a lot of people who don't know any of that, and I already had a lot of had made a lot of changes to my diet just because I have some allergies and intolerances and stuff. So I was already doing pretty good on that front, but
Right.
I think that that's the exception. So I think that I wish that that was the case, and then I also wish that when I tell you that doctors have no idea what exercises are okay for EDS, they don't. At least they didn't when I was diagnosed. It was, okay, you can't work out. You can't, like, they actually told me that. They said you cannot like lift weights or do anything that's weight bearing at all. And they told me to avoid high impact things, which that does have merit in some cases. We shouldn't be running around on trampoline parks necessarily. I mean, to each their own, I guess, but you won't catch me out there. But but it's I wish doctors knew, because there's so much that we can do that is beneficial to us that they're saying don't do this.
Right. Have you thought about what your life would look like or where you would be in this current moment if you hadn't done the hypermobility program?
Um, I I will answer that by flashing back to moments before. There were days, if I can get a little bit dark, there were days that I would lay in my bed in the dark and cry because I was like, I want to live. I love my life, but it is so painful and so difficult. How could it possibly be worth it? Like, how could this be worth it? And I am not, I love my life and I'm happy, but I was like, I am literally at my limit physically. Like I just can't do this. And I don't understand how this could be worth it. Like there were just moments where I just ached so thoroughly throughout my entire body. It was so painful that I was like, no one understands. I'm alone, which is ridiculous because like I told you, I have the most incredible support network of people like in real life, like my boyfriend and
Right.
my mom and dad and my sister and brother-in-law, like my best friends. Like I have so many people that have always been so, so good to me. But there's a point where your mind just kind of breaks from so much physical pain. And I mean, there are studies that show that pain rewires your brain. But guess
Yeah.
what? You can rewire it back. So I would say things would be a lot darker for me, I think, right now. And I've always had my faith to lean on, and my relationship with Jesus has always been very important to me. But this has definitely given me tools that I wouldn't have. And I don't know that I would be able to do the job that I'm doing now. And I don't think that I would be, for instance, I have a niece and I love to pick her up and carry her around and play with her and run around and chase her and tickle her. And I don't think I could do any of that if I wasn't strength training. She's heavy.
Wow. It's I'm probably done 15 podcasts now, and I would say half of the members have in some point of the conversation shared that. um, I think Camille was saying, she's like, I never thought I would even have remote suicidal thoughts, or Joel as well. He's like, I love my life. And he's like, but I got 2 kids and a wife and I'm addicted to Oxycontin and like nothing is working. Like it just, I don't want to have these thoughts, but I don't know how else to not have them. I've been struggling for so long and I want to get better and I can't get better. So yeah, it's just, that is what is heartbreaking, knowing that there are people out there who are currently having those thoughts right now, who want to get better. Right. And I know, I don't, in my own journey, I never got to that point, but I do have empathy and I think I can connect with people just for understanding. Like if, I don't know how I would have thought if I had to deal with another year of pain, that year and a half for me was already enough. I don't wish that upon, I don't have many enemies. I don't think I have enemies, but for the sake of the saying, I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. And I truly believe that, but I'm just really grateful that you are no longer in that place and that you had your faith to rely on and friends and family. And, you did persevere through that, because, your cousin joined our program. It sounds like this is a program that you've told a lot of people about. We just, continue to see, it seems cliche, but life-changing successes with the program. Like that is what a life-changing success is at the most dark level. Like if I do not do this, like I might not be here anymore. Or if I'm here, like I'm not here. I'm not the person that I want to be, because whatever my embodiment is not who I could be, and that's a really dark thought, but
Well, and
also makes me,
sorry,
yeah, go for it, please.
I would even go a little further and say that like I would not have classified myself as suicidal ever, but I would say that there is a distinction of almost having a death wish, which is like, I don't want to die, but I wouldn't necessarily mind. Does that make sense? Like it's kind of like I'm suffering so much that if something were to happen, it would just be kind of like, okay, And I think there are probably, I was closer. I still wasn't, I wouldn't say I was completely there because this was more of a, every once in a while at my lowest moment, I'm laying there like this life is unbearable.
Right.
But I think there's probably a lot more people that fall in that camp of, I have a death wish. Like I don't even,
Definitely.
like I'm just exhausted. I hurt all the time and I don't really actively care that much,
Sure.
And hopefully it's not many people, but like you said, it's pain. Pain does things to your brain.
For sure. Yeah. Unresolved pain. And then, going and trying to get the answers and, like, well, I guess if this is what life looks like, if this is what these support groups look like, if this is what, doctors and
Right.
medicine has to offer me, like, I guess this is just what it's going to be, yeah, it's tough. What actually, what prompted you, or how did you come across Wealth? I know we're doing a big circle around, but I'm always curious how people find the program.
Oh, you know what? It was Instagram. It was Instagram. So I remember seeing, I think it was Andrew's posts, just come across my feed, like the algorithm brought it to me.
Yeah.
And I remember I followed him because I was like, okay, like this is interesting. And honestly, I think I followed him for like 2 or 3 years, just kind of like suspiciously watching from the shadows before I finally was like, all right, I'm gonna try this.
I love it. Another thing I do remember you were saying was, just thoughts before joining the program. You kind of said like the thoughts that you believe to be true because you had EDS and chronic pain, like, oh, you're never going to have kids, you're never going to get married, you're too much of a burden, you'll suffer your entire life. I remember, and I was looking back at your story, those were things that you wrote. How does that feel to know that, you used to have those thoughts? You're never going to get married, you're never going to have kids, you're a
Yeah.
burden, you're going to suffer.
For such a long time, it was so deeply like ingrained in me that, this is a suffering sentence and I could never pass this on. And also, I don't want to resign anyone else to a life of caring for me because obviously I'm inevitably going to become, completely dependent on somebody else. And I'll probably be totally disabled by 30.
Wow, that was a thought.
Oh yeah, I mean, a lot of the chatter out there is, oh, it gets much worse in your 30s, so just get ready. There's a lot of that in the online communities where they're saying like, if you think your 20s is bad, just wait till your 30s, and that sucks. And so I had this mentality of like, I need to like make sure I have really good health insurance, or like trick some healthy guy into marrying me, or whatever. And I would say that Wealth was a big part of reversing that mentality for me. And the other big part was just changes in my, I went to therapy and addressed a lot of those thoughts and addressed a lot of that fear. And meeting the most incredible man ever has also helped with that, because he is amazing. And anytime I express any kind of fear to him, he's like, we'll figure it out. It's okay. Like, I'm
That's
not going
awesome.
anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, finding a good partner is under. I don't even know if I would say underrated. I think it can be underrated for people who don't appreciate that, but I guess maybe that's the definition of what underrated is.
Yeah.
Um, the thought of, do you believe those to be true? Like, do you have plans on having kids? Do you believe that you can take care of yourself? Do you believe that you need to keep suffering?
No, I know that there will be periods where my health varies. I know, like right now, I'm recovering from whatever I did to my back. She said it was the worst dislocation she's ever seen from me. So shout out to the dressing up as Belle. But
You're doing it for the kids.
you're doing it for the kids. It's so great. I would do it. I mean, it's honestly, I think it blesses me more than anything else. But
I know, right? Isn't that's the thing with,
so
for people
they're
who
so
really enjoyed charity, or it's like being nice to other people. What I found is like, in a way, it's not selfish, but it's just,
It's
it
kind
makes
of
me
almost
feel so
I know.
good.
It's like I promise you I'm doing this. Like it's helping me. Like I don't know what to tell you. Yeah,
Right.
I get that. But no, that's something that we've talked about at length about, I've those fears about like, will I be a good mom? Will I be able to persevere through the pain and through the energy issues and like all of this stuff? And to be honest, like I have friends who are hypermobile that have kids, and sometimes it's really difficult. But at this point, I am confident enough in my family and in my boyfriend, and having a niece that I'm around all the time and that I get to um, kind of take part in, shaping her life, has made me realize that like this is not an unattainable dream. And so we do plan on, someday when we get married, trying to have kids. And, not everybody with EDS can have kids. So if not, then we'll adopt or foster and try to love those kids as best as we can and give them the security and home that you know they need. And maybe that's God's plan for us. And so it's just the ability to consider it is not something that a few years ago I was like, no, I'm not having kids. Like the curse ends with me.
Interesting. Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering, if you were thinking, ending that curse. I don't want to pass this on. I don't want my
Yeah.
kids to suffer with what I've suffered through.
Yeah.
But
Frank,
does
I'm glad that I was born. I'm glad
right,
that my parents didn't, they knew something was up with my dad's neuromuscular condition. He wasn't accurately diagnosed until last year, but I'm really glad they had kids. I'm really glad I exist. So it's like,
right? Well, and now, I mean, ideally, the people that you bring into this world moving forward, I mean, as you with
they
what
would have
you've
the
gone
tools and
through,
the knowledge. Yes. And
yeah,
that's what is so reassuring, even just with my niece, because, she could be hypermobile. We don't know. She's too young to really know at this point. But if she is, she's going to have an auntie that knows what to do and how to help her be strong and grow well and not get injured.
yeah. I mean, that's kind of the way that I look at it. I mean, our programs are lifetime access, right? But I think ideally, generationally, or just even within your own lifetime, like if you go through hardship and you really solve it, or you really find better ways to persevere through that,
Yeah.
you're able to make that challenge that you went through so much more meaningful and help other people kind of progress through that and guide them through that. And, at the time, when I was like, oh God, why God, why am I dealing with this disc herniation, blah, 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 this back pain, it's all about me. Um, and now looking back on it, the amount of lives that I've just been able to touch, and
I know.
people who are like, thank you, Cameron, for talking to me on the phone. And, I did the program, I'm out of pain. I'm like, I didn't do the program for you. You did it, but I had a positive conversation with you and I encouraged you to do something for yourself. And now look at you, and you can spread that, so that's, and I know Katie and Andrew would say the same thing. And just, it's so cool to think about the ripple effect of the
It's
amount
huge.
of people that have gone through the program, yourself included, right? So I think that should give you some comfort moving forward. If so and so has, if my kids or if people around me that I love do go through these challenges, at least I know that I can really help them through that and kind of guide them, or there is something out there for them that is maybe unconventional right now, hopefully becomes a little more conventional, rather than just all of the pharmaceutical stuff that we throw at people.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. It's been a huge blessing. I actually have felt like God has brought all these people to me that have Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility because I have the experience now to, I mean, there's three people other than me that are on the Whealth program that I've referred. Um,
Wow.
I tell a lie, two Whealth and one on, what's the other one called?
Purple mattress.
No, the other program.
Oh, I don't know which one.
You're Limitless.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yes,
Yeah.
sorry,
Okay.
still Wealth, but not hypermobility. So two
All right.
hypermobility ones.
I was like, all right, we got the purple
You're like,
mattress.
super
We're gonna
macro.
plug another fitness program out there.
No, no.
I was like, hey, go for it, right? And I think that is another thing too that I do sometimes think about. We talk about other pages, other companies that are helping people get out of pain, and it's like I've heard this saying that I do really like, the when you're talking about the space that we're in, rehab space, the competition is the couch. There are so many people who are sedentary. There are so many
Yep.
people reliant on, big pharma that's not really helping them with their goals. Like, we are really in a minuscule, pond in terms of being able to provide the knowledge and education that we're doing. So
Yeah.
if there are other people, and I know and hope that there are plenty of other companies out there doing what we're doing. There's got to be, right? Because we don't even
Right.
have a big enough touch. We need more people kind of advocating for this message. So, anyways, all that to say, if you have other things as well and suggestions, we're open to those. So the Purple Mattress Limitless program as well, which is our program,
Yeah.
Hypermobility Program. Uh, let's wrap it up. Do you have any? We've covered a lot. Do you have any last remarks or anything that we didn't chat about, Kelsie?
Honestly, we covered a lot. I would just say, truly, if you think that wealth can resolve even 20% of your pain, imagine the difference that would make. And honestly, I think it would do a lot more than that. But I mean, look at the value of that and the snowball of down the years, how your health is going to be impacted. Putting on muscle increases your metabolic health. I mean, there are so many benefits to movement. We were designed to move. And I truly believe that. And it has been so evident to me throughout this program. So and you've got what is it, a 30-day money back guarantee?
Yep.
You got nothing to lose. That's all I would
Yeah.
say.
That's what we. Well, thank you for saying that, Kelsie. Thank you for spending your time with me this Tuesday afternoon. Very generous of you. I love your story. So yeah, thank you, Kelsie.
Thank you so much.
All right. Hey, take care.
You too,
All right,
Cam.
bye.